Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to today's webinar/conversation. This has been an extremely challenging time. We've not been this way before. This is not like a March snowstorm that's going to melt by the end of the week. This isn't even like the budget impasse, where money wasn't flowing, but it flowed eventually. Society and the world has never been confronted by something of this magnitude. So we know that it is a time that folks are left feeling confused, frustrated, and afraid. That includes the families that we work with, it includes our staff, but it also includes our program directors, owners, and operators, because where is this taking us? There's been some opportunities to discuss programs that are serving significant numbers of subsidized children. And we're very fortunate that the Commonwealth through Ocdel is continuing to move child care subsidy payments forward based on enrollment and not attendance. These are all good things. However, I keep referring to it as COVID-19 time, and things are moving fast, really fast. And announcements are released, and 2 minutes later, another announcement is released. And in part, it's because of just the changing nature of this disease and how both we're as individuals, which we're trying to react to it, but also as the Commonwealth and Governor Wolf and Secretary Levine are trying to react to it. So we have to bear with this. And when somebody says, "Well, I heard today," and I was like, "But what time did you hear that?" So part of our conversation today is to explore what are the challenges, but what are also some of the solutions that our colleagues are coming up with to kind of work within this COVID-19 time. We do have, I'm going to go to the next slide. Let's try to make sure this works here. Yes. There we go. We have over 500 people who registered for today's webinar. So because of that, as you can imagine, you are all in listen-only mode. We also have a tremendous number of panelists who are going to help us navigate this. And nearly all of PACA's staff is on the webinar to help support what we're doing. Right now, as I said, folks are in listen-only mode. Of course, when I say this, if you can't hear me, it doesn't really help you, but there is the opportunity to listen only, so you don't have to watch the webinar. There, up at the top of the box, there is a little button that says audio, and it will give a call-in number, so if people want to call in and just listen. If folks are having technical difficulties throughout the webinar, Teresa Ryan is at that number, 717-350-8166, and she can help you. We are recording the webinar, and we will be sending out, we will provide a link both to the recording and also to the questions that come up during the course of the webinar. So what I'd like to do first is go over the agenda. Opening, I will introduce you, or have our panelists introduce themselves. We will talk a little bit about how we're going to work this call so that we can get people's questions and their suggestions. We're going to update folks on where we are, at least as of last night, which is the most recent information that I have, but Karen Grimm-Thomas from Ocdel is joining us, and she, if anything has happened this morning, I'm sure Karen can provide some information. We're going to share PACA's COVID-19 survey, and just to give you an idea of what over 500 of your colleagues have provided to us about kind of background information. We're then going to ask our panelists to respond to the 3 big questions that they have confronted regarding COVID-19 and their programs. We're going to have, then we'll open it up for questions. We'll talk about what's next, and then how we keep in touch as we move forward. So what I'd like to do next is to introduce our panelists. We have Mary Graham from Children's Village. You want to say hi, Mary? Or not?
Hi, how are you? Yeah, I just got to figure out how to. Hi, everyone. Sending warm, comforting thoughts to everybody. We will get through this. Some of us may retire sooner than later, though.
Thank you, Mary. Mary's program, if you don't know Mary's program, Children's Village, operates in the Chinatown section of Philadelphia, which has raised all kinds of issues for her, which I'm sure she will share. I also want to introduce Karen Grimm Thomas. Many people know Karen. Karen, do you want to say hi to everybody?
Good morning, everybody. Diane, thank you first for giving people this opportunity and for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here, and we'll answer the questions that I can. And I'm really interested in hearing some solutions that some people have had that have worked for them, and just getting some general information about where folks are so that we can make sure that we are thinking about things. We're trying to think ahead as much as we can, but we're only thinking so far ahead. So this is going to be really informative for me. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Karen. Joining us at 11:45, he's not on yet, is Matt Fontana, who is an attorney and also a board member of Children's Village. So when Matt signs on, we'll take the time to introduce Matt. Also joining us is Ann O'Brien from Wonder Spring in Narberth. Ann, do you want to say hi to folks?
Yes, hi. Welcome, everybody. I think it's really important that we're all together. I'm glad, Diane, that we are doing this for everyone. And I think if we hang together, we're going to somehow find our way through this. And I just want to acknowledge how hard it is for everybody, and especially for our families and kids, but happy to be of whatever help that I can be this morning.
Thank you, Anne. Also joining us is Margaret, or Maggie Rivera, from Holy Redeemer Child Care Program in the Meadowbrook section of Montgomery County. Maggie, would you like to say hi to everybody?
Hi, everybody. I know we're in a whole new world now. We woke up one morning, blinked in the afternoon, and we're in a different world. And the way we look at things will be changed forever, but we will get through this like we have other things in the past.
Thank you, Maggie, very much. Okay, so we're going to get back to our panelists in just a minute. I just want to provide a quick status update. Last night, Governor Wolf effectively shut down Pennsylvania. There is a list of programs that are considered essential. He was very clear in his address last night that childcare is shut down. Now, I'm saying that unless, of course, you have received a waiver, and Karen can speak to it too, and if you are a family or group childcare operating in a residence. But this is unequivocal at this point. There's no like, Diane, I heard it. Yes, go ahead, Karen, go ahead.
Sorry, just one clarification of that. Remember that it's not just whether you've received a waiver, if you've applied for a waiver, yes. You are able to, right. Now, Philadelphia, we're working some other things out with them because the city has an additional layer of consideration that they're putting into this. So I believe that where we are right now with that is that we're still processing their initial waiver, and programs are being told they can stay open, but they need to understand that as they work through with the city's what the city's criteria are, the city might come back to them and say, we have decided that at this point you do need to close. So, but for the rest of the state, if you have either received a waiver or you've applied for a waiver, if you've not heard from Octal, you should assume that you are okay to operate. If you are not okay to operate, we will reach out to you and let you know that.
Excellent. So that I was looking for that. So that's kind of the up-to-date status report. So this is how, so after the governor made his announcement, Octal really very quickly through the Early Ed News sent out a clarification just as Karen described. So this is really good. So this is where we are right now. So in truth, okay, we're actually taking a chance making a recording of this and actually having me say this, because PACA staff, many of us are here in the office today. So we're hoping that the state police do not see our cars in the parking lot and come and shut us down. So anyway, it's cool. It's cool.
I don't think they're enforcing until midnight tonight.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know.
It's
Okay.
midnight tonight. I think the idea was they wanted people to stay away, but recognizing that there are going to be some folks that needed to get into their offices and get stuff, and but so it's midnight tonight is what we were told.
Or to conduct a webinar for 500 people. That's exactly what it is. So that's where we are right now. So programs should be closed unless they have a waiver, or they're applying for a waiver, or they are a group or a family child care program operating in a residence. We know, again, that this is challenging and this is hard, and there's still lots of questions.
Diane, I'm sorry,
yeah,
I keep doing this to you. I want to also just provide another clarification around the families and the
Sure.
group homes in residences. This is not an edict that you must stay open. It's just
Good
basically
point.
Ocdel saying that because you are a much smaller setting, you're much more locally in tune, you know what the needs of your families are, you're better able to assess the health situation of your families. The idea was that, we felt that you had a better eye on what would work for your program, for your, your family childcare or your group home than Ocdel did. So we're not by any means saying that you have to stay open, but if you feel that the parameters all make sense for you to stay open, the impacts to the larger community are so much lessened, we're allowing you to do that.
Good point. Good point. Thank you, Karen. What I'd like to do is I'd like to share a little bit about what PACA has collected from the surveys so far. Yesterday or the day before, PACA put out a survey to kind of assess, actually it was yesterday morning, to kind of get a handle on where folks are right now. So this was as of about 9 o'clock this morning. These are, let me step back before I get to that. This is what we're doing. So this is kind of how we're handling how the call will work. I'm sorry, I'm stepping back. We have 500 people on the call. There is absolutely no way we could open the lines to let everybody talk. And I know people want to talk. And we're going to try to see if we can get at least some people to talk. But what we're asking you to do is, over in the dashboard, there is a section that says questions. In order to manage the potential of 500 questions, even if somebody just only asked one, what we're asking is, if you have a question, if before you ask your question, you type the question mark and then type your question. If you have a suggestion or a comment, if you would type an exclamation point before your question, before your suggestion or comment. This way, our Maureen or Sean can kind of help sort out where we are, and it allows us to say, oh, here's a question, and we can respond to it right away. Here's a suggestion, we can respond to it right away. You also have the chat box, which Sean is monitoring. So if you want to, share another additional information, you can go to the chat box. So if you have a question, please start the question with a question mark. If you have a suggestion or a comment, please start that with an exclamation point. The other good thing about this is, by using the question box, we're collecting those questions and they're recorded in GoToWebinar. In addition, if I didn't say it at the beginning, we are recording this webinar so we can go back to it. And we will send the link out to everyone, and we will post it on the PACA website, and also make it available on at least on the PACA Facebook page. So let me get to the survey. So I don't remember exactly how many questions we asked, but we asked, what type of program that you represent. So the survey respondents, obviously 84%, 85% were centers, but we did have We did have family and group programs also answering the question. We asked, of course, it's a double question, so you can see that I was just reiterating it. This is what happens when you put a webinar through it, you know, at 9 o'clock this morning, and you were going to do it last night, except your mother called and say, Diane, can you help me get onto the church service on Sunday remotely at 9 o'clock? So I had to take care of my mom first, and it's all cool. All right, so almost everybody, 85% were families. We also asked how many children are these programs serving as of March 9th, which is really kind of the start. Unbelievably, it's felt like this has been going on for months, but the governor's first announcement about the mitigation plan for Montgomery County was only 8 days ago. So this, you know, this just reiterates how quickly this is moving. So if we look at this number, the folks that have 276 people responded, I think that's the number, responded to the survey, like these detailed questions about the survey. And so what is that? That's over 32,000 children that are impacted. We also asked a percentage or the number of children private pay, and also the children who are receiving child care subsidy, and also others, including pre-K counts, Philly pre-K, or other scholarships. So you can see that the folks that have participated in the survey already are serving large numbers of children. And of course, this is just a snapshot of what of programs impacted. We asked, what is the status of your program as of today? And you can see that 76% of 484 people said that they were closed as a result of the governor's directive. 11% either have been granted a waiver at that time or had applied for a waiver. And then we have the smaller numbers that talk about, you know, family or group in private homes. And then we also, I think, Karen, this is your point too, where we have, if you look at that second, there are family and group providers that could be open but have chosen to close. So I think it gives us again a snapshot. We also asked what the status of staff was so far. And as you can see, those percentages, and of course on my little thing is so small that I can't see it. And let me see if I can, yes. So most staff, 36, almost 37%, most staff have been laid off. Almost 26% are continuing to pay staff, but they are completing online training, they're doing planning, they're engaging with families, they're deep cleaning the facility and doing other work. Then others, they're continuing, some are continuing to pay staff, but are not requiring that they work at all. And then the other, we have some details. So when we finish up this survey, we'll be pushing this out. And we might be able to find, you know, what are some of the other choices. Maureen, we might want to look at some of, you know, what are people suggesting about other choices around staff as we move through.
Yeah, the biggest one for staff that wasn't captured was there's a lot of texting with parents going on.
That's great. That's great. Okay. All right. So I have to click on here and then we go here. And then this is probably the big question, right? For many people who decided to join us on the webinar today. If your program is closed, are you charging tuition to your private pay families? So you can see those numbers. This is probably the hardest decision that providers have had to make. You know, in consideration of the families and their programs, in consideration of their own, you know, program viability moving forward. And that's one of the reasons, I mean, it's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this call today to talk about, while we probably all recognize the challenges, there are other challenges, but some people have come up with suggestions Some have solutions. But again, we're all in this together. So what I wanted to do is to ask our panelists. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to start with Mary and ask Mary of, what have been the three big questions or the three big issues that you've been confronted with, and how have you responded?
Okay, thanks, Diane. And Karen, I just want to personally thank you for extending the invitation to providers to, contact you if there's concerns. And thank you for spending this morning on the call. I know that people are seeing you as the voice of Octal. Everyone listening, Karen is not the decision maker. She is conveying information. So remember, we can't shoot the messenger. So Karen, thanks again for joining us. This has been an unprecedented time, as we all know. We all have concerns about our families, our children, and our staff. They're the three most challenging things we're talking about and thinking about. So let's go to the families. For us at Children's Village, this did start before 8 days ago, because as soon as word about the coronavirus hitting China got out, we were confronted with a lot of concerns from the families we work with, both those Asian and non-Asian families. First of all, for the Asian families, many of them were working in Asian industries, restaurants or small shops. Chinatown in Philadelphia took a huge hit immediately. In fact, at one point, Mayor Kenny and City Council went down to have, a meal in Chinatown, because you could get the coronavirus very easily, but not from eating Chinese food. There was a lot of racism that was already started, and unfortunately, the current politics are not helping. This is not a Chinese disease or illness. Unfortunately, it developed in China, so we think. But again, it's not. We have to remember that, and it's really important in this day and age. At one point, I said to somebody, this reminded me of the AIDS crisis, how people were associated with an illness just because they were part of a community. So we have to keep track of that. So that's what it was about families. So they were already losing income and were having difficulty making copays, but really wanted to keep their children in the program. Let's go to the children. The goal of a provider is to make sure that children and families and staff feel safe every day when they come. So while as administrators, we were very concerned about this issue, and that panic evolved over time. First, it was a concern, and then slowly it did become a crisis situation. We wanted to make sure that we weren't discussing it with families in front of children or with staff in front of children, and we didn't want them to be alarmed. So we had to play a fine line. How much information did we share? Families would contact us, and I said, all of these suggestions that the health experts and all these government officials are saying about how to prevent this disease from spreading are things that quality childcare centers do every day. Frequent hand washing, sanitizing of surfaces, disinfecting toys that kids have mouth, teaching kids and adults proper hygiene about, coughing and sneezing. So this is what we do all the time. So when they talk about all these industries and schools, elementary and high schools doing deep cleaning, parents would say, well, why aren't you doing a deep cleaning? Well, we do clean every night. We have an outside company that comes in and does a deep cleaning every night. We had, handles and light switches, but we do that all the time. So we had to convey that to families, but we also have to remember about the confidentiality issue, guys, not just of our children, but our families and our staff. We have a number of Asian staff, and sometimes they do visit, their village in China or their city in China. Before any of this, with official words and 14 days self-quarantine, we had a number of staff visit, go back to see their families in China, and when they were coming back. How do we deal with that? I did not want any animosity towards these, towards the staff from other staff or from families. So we gave them 2 weeks paid leave time to self-quarantine. You know, they were worried about doing that because they were going to lose income. And I just made the decision. This wasn't mandated by anybody, but let's do it. So we have to think about that. We had to think about that in the short run. Now that the center has closed under the guidance of the governor, it's for 2 weeks. So what we have, unfortunately, one of the benefits of this crisis is highlighting to all of us as administrators, we have to have very clear policies and procedures for families and for staff. In our parent provider agreement, it clearly says for non-subsidized families that your tuition is due weekly. You're charged tuition regardless if your child is in attendance or not, or you're on vacation or not. Here are the 11 days that we close to families each year. They include 8 holidays and 3 days of in-service. And then in the provider contract, it says you can be charged up to an additional 10 emergency closing days for it, if need be. We don't say because of weather, because it's not always weather. It could be a water main break, as those of us in large and small cities have to deal with sometimes. So our private pay families are expected, and we notified them via email separately saying, yes, we're closed, and yes, as per your parent agreement, you will be charged for these 2 weeks. We don't have an issue, or not an issue, we don't have any leeway to charge them after these 2 weeks. That's a good thing or a bad thing. It's good because many providers on the conference call are worried. Can I charge them? What happens if I charge them and they won't provide service? So for me, that's a somewhat easier decision, but I also had to think about the financial aspect of it. I have a wonderful board of directors, and they're very concerned about our staff and our parents, and even questioned at one point, maybe we should waive that provider agreement. And I clearly said no, because that's something that has been part of the handbook and contract, and we're going to follow that. We don't nitpick policies, when are convenient. But it also, clarified how we cannot charge after these 2 weeks. For staff, we're one of the few programs that has a union. We've been unionized since day one under the Pennsylvania Federation of Teachers, because we always dealt with parents working in the union, work in unions. We had not always, we initially worked with families who worked in the union industry. So according to the contract, it says when Children's Village has an emergency closing, staff will be paid. So I did pay them for these 2 weeks. We will have to revisit that contract from this point forward, and it will be done through negotiations and talk with the union, saying that for us to continue paying staff indefinitely would put the center at risk. We're a small program. We're not like the school district. We don't get, even though we're at the Pennsylvania Federation of Teachers, we don't get any funding from the school district. Our teachers are not considered school district personnel. So while we would all like to be part of a school district at this point and have public dollars to continue paying staff until we would go back to work, we can't. So we are paying staff for these 2 weeks, but then we will need to figure out what happens after this. In terms of paying staff for these 2 weeks, I made it very clear they're not on vacation. They know that when we return, people may have to make sure the rooms are, in order. I did invite everybody to come in on Monday who felt comfortable, pick up their laptop, pick up any paperwork they want to be doing at home, knowing that they are expected to continue doing lesson plans for the future weeks, knowing that they have to continue with parent-teacher conferences, children's reports or information they would share on a home visit. I did forget to mention that we are a program that has home Head Start. So even before the governor shut down the centers, I made the decision that our staff would not be doing home visits into the families' homes. And there is a waiver in the Head Start regulations that you can do one home visit a year, not taking place in the family's home. And I notified our grantee, which is the school district, and they in fact later came out and said all home visits would be done via the phone. So some of the things that we do have guidance on, but so our staff, it was interesting. Out of our entire staff, all but 4 or 6 showed up. Didn't show up because they themselves have health issues, or they're living with family members who have, who are either in the vulnerable age group like I am, over 65, or 60, or they're living with, somebody who has, getting treatment for, a serious illness. They came in, and people were fortunate we could maintain 6 feet distance. It was almost a benefit for them to be together because they're nervous as well. So I think these are really hard issues to figure out. I bet after this crisis is over, all of us will have better written handbooks for families and for staff about what to do. I do have a lawyer. We have a number of lawyers on our board. Matt Fontana will be joining us shortly, and they're giving us guidance. Again, not legal guidance from their firm, but this is what it is. We also have to talk about whether or not we lay somebody off for unemployment or for furlough. As one of the other things Children's Village does is we run a learning lab, and myself and another consultant do business trainings for providers. And I work with a lot of directors who work for owners who are not on site. And the directors were saying, should we pay our staff? And my comment was, if you are fully subsidized, be sure that the owners make sure the staff are paid. Octal has been very clear saying they're going to compensate providers during this time. We have to make sure that providers do the right thing, make sure their staff are paid as much as they can pay them. We want to make sure we keep these staff. So these are all questions in it, that we need to think about. The other thing.
Mary, I appreciate your insight. I'd like to get to some of the other panelists too.
Sorry.
That's okay. And then we also, because Matt will be joining us in 15 minutes, so I want to be able to move on. I know you're raising a lot of questions that people in the audience I know have. So not to cut you off, but I am cutting you off. Sorry. Thank you very much. And I did, Mary, just before I cut Mary off, and luckily I've known Mary for very many, many years. One of the things that I do want to remind everybody that we're talking about potential solutions here, but we are not providing legal advice. And each program situation is different. And we encourage you to speak to an attorney, your own attorney, before you may be, if you have questions about the legality of something, or it's just one of those things. And I know that Ann's going to speak a little bit about how, her consultations, and I can also share what I've heard from some of our members who I've spoken to. So Ann, can I turn this over to you and talk about, what are some of the 3 big questions that you've confronted as this has rolled out?
Hi, everybody. I think I've confronted like 1,000 really big questions, and many of them I don't have an answer to, but maybe I can just kind of say briefly how we've approached this at Wonderspring. We are about 50-50 private pay versus all of the government streams of revenue. And I will, when you have a moment, our subsidy contracts say that we can't get subsidy if we're not charging tuition. So if some of us choose not to charge tuition in April, I'd be curious how that will impact subsidy agreements. So that's a question for the side that we've been wondering about. We are in Montgomery County, so I'm probably a day or 2 ahead of this than many of you, because we were caught up in the storm last week. We have a program in the Lower Merion School District. Lower Merion School shut down quickly last Thursday because of exposure to the physician from CHOP. We followed suit and closed. Then by the afternoon, the governor shut the whole county down. So what the decisions that we've made, much like Mary, and I think probably like every person on the call, we're trying to make decisions that are in the best interest of our children, families, and our teachers, who we all know already live on the edge. We balance our budgets on their backs. So we charge tuition at the beginning of the month. So our families where we shut down and have shut down that are tuition paying essentially lost 2 weeks. We're now closed for 2 weeks. We made the decision that we were not going to provide any refunds for that time, and that we were going to clearly let our families know that we were paying the teachers. Many reached out immediately and said, please tell us they're going to be okay. We sent that letter last week, and we got essentially zero pushback. I was kind of surprised. At the end of the day, our tuition agreement says much what many of yours, which is you pay whether we're open or not. Obviously, this is unprecedented, but it says served us well. We are in the process of trying to figure out April right now. We've been crunching numbers. What we would like to do is to continue to pay staff through the end of April, and to what we're considering, and our board hasn't finally decided, but what we're considering is deferring the April billing, but asking families who have the means and would consider either paying their tuition or making a contribution to help us do that while we kind of figure out how to find our way through this. We are fortunate in that we do have some financial resources. It's just not knowing how long this goes, how much we put at risk in the short run. Diane, anything else that you want me to address?
I think those are really good. So what you're saying, Anne, is that your staff are continuing to work right now and they're being paid.
Yes, I didn't say that. Our staff are doing lesson plans. They're reaching out to families. They're doing professional development. Our directors have been holding virtual staff meetings. So, and we understand that every person has a different situation. Some of our staff obviously have young children, so we're giving people lots of flexibility, and they're certainly not working 40 hours. But we are all, continuing our teachers are continuing to work. And I think if we went through April, we would do that. We also feel, we want to be ready to reopen. We're hoping this is over someday, and the day that it's over, I want to be able to reopen, the next day. So, and we think the continued relationship with families, we worry deeply about the disruption in the lives of our children who love their teachers and their friends. So trying to figure out ways to support that. We've also been doing a whole lot of social media postings for families, and people are welcome to steal anything that we're posting, just giving family ideas and inspiring them and just trying to support them, because we know that this is hard for them too.
Did you, just out of curiosity, did you apply for a waiver for any of your programs?
We have not applied for a waiver, no.
Okay, thank you. Good. I now want to introduce Maggie Rivera. Maggie sent me an email this morning. Maggie's program is attached to Holy Redeemer Hospital, and she sent me this really, really wonderful email this morning. And I said, Maggie, do you want to be a panelist? So Maggie, Maggie said yes. So Maggie, could you share some of the issues that you've confronted as a program who is definitely connected to essential services, and what have been some of the procedures that you have put in place with your waiver to serve those children of those families?
Hi, everybody. Well, it's been many parts moving and figuring different things out all at once in a short amount of time. That seems like a year ago, but it's only been a week. One thing that I've learned in talking to other daycares that are hospital-run daycares is I'm blessed. I have a health system and I have a leadership who has been on the forefront of things. As small as I think we are, I think we've done better than many of I shouldn't say this, maybe I shouldn't record it, never mind. But we have done very well with other health systems. My leadership has been keeping me informed, had us on conference calls as part of the health system on this hard coronavirus thing before this hit last week. So we were implementing processes and changes and procedures to our daily lives before it happened, and then quickly overnight a lot changed. There are precautions that I'm concerned about, talking to my peers who have gotten waivers as well, in regards to the care of the children when they come in. We have changed our health procedures a little bit for this purpose for a while. Hopefully, eventually we can go back to the way we do things. Yes, Mary stated we have excellent health care procedures and cleaning and sanitizing and disinfecting, but we're in a different world today. We woke up in a different world. So there are things that we have to do. What we're doing is just what the hospitals are doing, and that is we're not allowing parents in the building, first of all. And we're lowering the number of people that can drop off and pick up their children to limit the spread of germs and exposure. When they arrive to the center, we have a vestibule, so it's like a two-door thing, as if you go into a mall, where you enter one door or a bank, and then there's another door. We're stopping parents there. They're not coming any further. We are gloved up, taking precautions, bodily fluid type precautions, and we are taking the temperatures of all the children and the parent before we allow them in the building. If one of them have a temperature of 100.4, they're not coming into the building. They need to get medical guidance, and we need a doctor's note for them to return to the center, because we just don't know. We can't take the risk. And we are dealing with employees of a health system. We are open only to employees of our health system and medical personnel of other local hospitals that need care and they don't have child care. Our regular community members are closed, so our numbers have dropped immensely. But we're finding our other employees who never utilized us are desperate for child care, and we are enrolling them into the center for a weekly basis so that we can keep the spots for those who were originally here, and yet provide care for our medical personnel who desperately need child care so that they can be at work, and that is happening. So we take the temperature before they come in the building. If they're all okay, they come in. We're also documenting that we take their temperature and that it's normal, because we're monitoring to see if there's any change. If there's any changes, that's a cue to us that we need to also say to them, hey, you need to get checked out. You need to talk to your doctor, because we don't know with this the illness what it looks like. I spoke to a pediatrician the other day who said to me a few weeks ago, she thought, oh, what's the big deal? But she said, here's the thing, Maggie, we don't know enough about this virus. We haven't built an immunity to it like everybody has to other things like the common cold. So that's why there's such fear. And that's why these precautions need to be done. So I'm also limiting the staff that take the temperatures. I do it and 2 other staff members. Then we hand the child off to another staff person to walk them back to where they belong, to their classrooms. So the parent isn't entering the building. I have several staff. Half of my staff are at risk. They fall into the age category or health category. So I need to protect them as well. They also, for those who can come in have come in, and if they don't have children in their care, because we are very low in numbers, people are only sending their children if they absolutely have to. They are doing their trainings. They are doing the deep cleanings. We have deep cleaned. We had it done over the weekend, but God bless my staff, they've gone even further. And we've closed classrooms down because we don't want germs getting in there. We're not using them. We don't have the numbers, no need to. We also have required parents not to send in bags or lunch boxes. We're asking them to put all their child's belongings in Ziploc bags because, again, we're trying to cut down any germs coming into this building. All blankets and sheets that are coming into this building, we're fortunate we have a laundry room. We are washing those items. We're not sending them home, again, to cut down any exposure. Maybe we're taking it too far, but these are precautions that we are also seeing in the health system. They're not letting visitors in. When you go to the ER and you take a loved one, you're waiting outside in your car if you're going to stay at the hospital. Only special situations are you permitted in. Every employee in our health system that walks to start their day of employment is having their temperature taken. We're doing it with visitors. We're waiting for, right now we're doing the touch, so we have to clean with alcohol the thermometers. We're going to be getting a non-touch thermometer, which is like a radar gun, to take temperatures. That's happening up in our hospital right now. They're getting it for our child care center, so I won't even have to open the door to parents and children until I've taken their temperature. We're not there yet. We're waiting for it to arrive because it's very hard to get the supplies needed, and the hospital's the highest priority. Sleeping used to be 3 feet or 4 feet. It's now trying to do 6 feet apart. Distancing children when they're eating lunch. These are all things that need to be thought about if you're running a child care center with a waiver. And I'm saying this because as I talk to my peers, the directors of other hospitals, they weren't even guided in this. I'm very, very fortunate that my health system is giving me this guidance. But there are many centers who are receiving these waivers who are not getting any guidance. So I'm sharing this because you need to think about this. We're open because we have no choice. These people must be at work to help our community, to help keep us healthy and safe. But we need to do the same thing so that we can continue to be here and these children are okay. So it's a different world. We can't operate the way we operated Monday morning on March 9th for this time period.
Maggie, thank you so very, very much. I thought, given that Maggie is with a health system and has kind of this support to provide some insight to folks who are continuing to operate during this time. Again, I want to remind you that this is not legal opinion, but this is in many ways practical opinion. So we're hoping, and I don't know whether, Matt, have you joined us yet? I'm just going to check.
Diane, my understanding of that is that he has. I'm having trouble finding his name. Oh, Laurie said she made him a panelist, so we should be good now.
All right, good.
Yes. Can you all hear me?
Yes,
Teamwork.
thank you.
Great.
Glad. So Matt is here. Matt, you want to just tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from? That would be great.
Sure, happy to. So my name is Matthew Fontana. I'm a labor and employment attorney at the law firm of Faegre, Drinker, Biddle, and Reith in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm also a board member of Children's Village, and Mary Graham reached out to me a little bit ago and asked if I would jump on the call to answer any questions related to the ever-changing employment scenario in light of the outbreak. And I said I'd be happy to. I talked to Mary before that I can't provide, technical specific legal advice to each individual circumstance, but I'm happy to provide some guidance and some best practices and some suggestions that hopefully will be helpful.
This is terrific. So we're right at kind of the question period. And so as Maureen and Sean go through some of the questions that have come online, I had a comment this morning, and I'm hoping that you can respond. We have heard reports that there are some staff in programs that have requested waivers that are feeling very uncomfortable in continuing working at this time. And unfortunately, their directors are insisting that they work or they be terminated. What are some options for those staff? In this case, would they be eligible for unemployment because they would voluntarily or involuntarily be terminated? I mean, as opposed to laid off. Is that something you could answer for us?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to provide some guidance on that. So ordinarily, if there's work available and you refuse to perform that work, then you're not eligible for unemployment compensation. Now, the Pennsylvania unemployment law has already been amended and will likely continue to be amended to reflect layoffs and issues surrounding an inability to work because of the COVID-19. Right now, the focus is on either work becoming unavailable or illness. So someone who feels like they can't go into work because they're either self-quarantining or because they themselves have been diagnosed. So in the scenario that you have, what I'd say is that if an employee just says, hey, I'm not going to go to work, and the employer says, well, then you're terminated, I would certainly apply and specify those conditions in the unemployment application. And, my sense is it's probably going to be looked at on a case by case basis, but the person who does that needs to understand that as a first principle, if there's work available and you're not taking advantage of that, you could get denied.
Thank you. Maureen, are there some other questions that have come up in the question box that may specifically relate to kind of workforce issues?
Well, there's lots of questions actually, but there's a couple that maybe Matt can help us with. One recurring theme are the legal implications of opening if someone, a staff member or a child, subsequently comes down with the coronavirus.
That's a great question, and there's definitely multiple parts to that question. I think the best way to look at it is employers owe kind of a general duty to the public. OSHA reflects a little bit of this to their employees to keep the workplace free of hazards, and to have plans and policies in place to provide a safe workplace. So, I would be recommending to all employers that they're following all relevant CDC state guidelines with respect to cleaning, with respect to being open, because all those things show that you're exercising that general duty. There's not a duty to be clairvoyant and to know the future. And so I don't think there's immediate liability if someone gets the COVID. But I think what centers have to be thinking about is the moment you are aware that someone has become ill, to shut down the facility, to notify the appropriate health authorities, to consider what type of cleaning measures need to be taken. I think the risk is less, well, what happens when I don't know? So long as you're exercising the appropriate caution, following the guidelines, I think that puts you on the right side of the kind of the general duty and the OSHA side of things. But once you know, I think there are a suite of actions you need to take, from notification, shutdown, cleaning, to make sure that you're doing what you need to do to break the transmission of the virus. That being said, I think from the employee standpoint, one thing folks want to keep in mind is that all the regular employment laws are still in force, right? So for example, with the ADA, employers want to be careful that they're not requiring employees to disclose underlying health conditions, things that in the ordinary course employers would not seek that information for. Now, certainly employers are well within their rights to, ask for people to report symptoms of COVID, to do thermometer testing, things like that are not a problem at all. But I do like to point out that, it's best if employers aren't, trying to find out which one of their employees might have an immunodeficiency, because that, could potentially cause some problems with the ADA. You have to get into some more facts, but I think from a liability standpoint, it's making sure you're steering on the right side of the ADA, and then you're exercising that general duty that you owe to your employees and to the broader public.
Terrific.
Thank
Any
you.
others?
No, there's no other questions. Everybody's fine.
Everybody's ready. Okay, we can end. Okay.
Right. Are there legal issues around paying some staff and not? So in this example, managers, like the director and assistant director, are being paid, but teachers who are presumably not working are not. Is that a problem? What kinds of considerations do they need to be thinking of?
Yeah, so a couple considerations. I mean, the first one is, if it's an at-will employee with no employment contract, then if they're not working, they don't have to be paid. Obviously, employers are free to decide to continue paying, make benefits, but as a general rule, if they're not working, they don't need to be paid. If there is some type of contract at play, then they may need to be paid. Then what the employer needs to do is just follow the contract, right? And whatever kind of it says would control. There's no issue with selecting certain employees to be paid because they're working or they're providing services, they're able to work remotely, and other employees simply don't have that ability. So the decision is not to pay them. The Pennsylvania has a wage payment collection law. What that means is you should keep your regular payroll processes. So for those who are working and you are going to pay, make sure you're doing that in the same frequency, at the same time, in the same manner. And I don't know how many centers this applies to, but to the extent that any of the centers are organized, which means their employees are represented by a union, a lot of what the center is going to have to do is just follow the collective bargaining agreement with respect to layoffs, payments, and things along those lines. But I think broadly speaking, the rule for most centers, for most employees, if they're not working, they don't need to be paid.
Great. Anything else, Maureen?
People are asking questions about looking forward to when this ends. What is the guidance regarding bringing people back from a layoff? What are their guidelines? What do they need to think of?
That's a great question, actually. And when you're talking about bringing people back, I think there's less legal risk. If you're one of the few centers that has a collective bargaining agreement and whose employees are organized, usually the agreement has a layoff and a recall procedure, so you just want to follow the agreement. If these are all at-will employees, there's no union involved, then it's really just a business judgment of the center when they think they can ramp up.
Good. Could you talk a little bit more, Matt, and I'm sure that there are other questions that Maureen has, about unemployment and whether, given what we know right now, right? And we know they're making, and as you said, they're making some adaptations to the unemployment process, like they're waiving the week.
Right.
But, have you heard of, if they're addressing anything around employers that, so here, okay, so the example that we've heard recently is that employers are requiring staff take paid time off before it, even if the program has actually closed down, instead of allowing individuals to directly apply for unemployment. In part, they're concerned about their unemployment surcharge, or whatever you want to call it, the potential unemployment surcharge.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm going to see if I can answer the question appropriately there. So it seems like the question is, in that situation, should an employee apply?
Yeah.
And I think the answer is yes. I mean, if the center is closed, there's no work available. If I don't do, most of my work is on the employer side, so I rarely, advise employees. But if I was on that side, I would say file. There's really no downside. At worst, your paid time off will be an offset against your unemployment, but there's not work available, right? And I think that the centers are going to err on the side of distribution of benefit, given what the governor said about wanting to make sure that Pennsylvanians are not, obviously we're all going to be adversely affected, but not overwhelmingly adversely affected from the economic part of this situation. So I think people should apply, and the service centers will make some decisions. But if the center's closed, the person's effectively laid off, they're eligible. The paid time off could be an offset, but they're still eligible.
I appreciate that. I did want to, because of this has come up, I did want to share, for folks that are on the call, that PACA has been this way before. If you remember, and I wanted to share a little bit about how it plays out. So PACA in 2011 lost its public funding for TEACH. We ended up laying off over 20 staff members. We had a significant balance in our account in the state unemployment insurance system. We were paying the minimum amount of state unemployment, percentage of state unemployment insurance because we had very few layoffs. After that first year, we got a notice from unemployment saying, do you want to pay off your balance of $130,000? And we were like, so what they did is they raised our rate from, I think it was 1.2 or 1.4 to 9.9. We're now 10 years later. Our balance in the fund is a negative $74,000. They continue to ask us if we'd like to pay it off, and we say no. But our rate is now down from 9.9 to 4.45. So if you get, I know that providers are afraid of that add-on, but it's workable. And even if you still have a significant balance like we do, $74,000 is still a significant balance. We're at least not paying that 9.9%. So I just wanted to share that as don't let that piece of it scare you from allowing staff to collect unemployment. Also, I do know that there's conversations around the stimulus about whether that penalty, for lack of a better word, might be waived during this time of profound economic impact from the virus. So I just wanted to share that while we were kind of on the top subject. Maureen, do you have? Go ahead.
More on the unemployment side. So from several of our participants are in faith-based programs, which, if for those of you that do not know, faith-based organizations do not participate in the unemployment system. Are there any options for the staff at those programs?
So that question, I apologize, just broke up a smidge. Could you ask that question one more time?
Sure. For our programs that are operating that are affiliated with religious faith-based programs and they're not participating in the unemployment compensation system, so they're not, at least under typical circumstances, eligible to apply. Is there any other avenues for those staff people?
I've never been asked that question, and I don't know.
Thank you for your honesty.
That's a great question, and I would not want to speculate.
Okay. Just kind of a comment in general. We've had a couple of people remind us as panelists and presenters that there are many small mom and pop programs represented here. So keep that in mind in our responses, as well as the larger multi-sites. There are questions about people who have staff laid off with regard to their paying health insurance.
So, you know, this gets similar to the question of payment. If there's a contract or there's a collective bargaining agreement, then that would probably control. If it's an at-will employee, it's really the policy of the center. I mean, if it's I guess I can speak to what I'm generally seeing is if it's being cast as a temporary layoff. This is an employee that we're going to need. There's just, because of this situation, we're going to lay them off for 2 or 3 weeks and play it by ear. Ordinarily, employers are maintaining the health insurance. There's not, can you just hold one second? I'm sorry, just 1 second.
Sure.
See, we're all working from home. Yeah.
Everybody's trying to keep up with multiple levels of things.
If it's more of a temporary layoff, what I'm seeing is employers are continuing to cover the health benefit. From a legal perspective, it's really up to the employer, because a layoff is a form of termination of employment. So there's not an obligation to continue to provide that medical benefit. But I think in situations where the idea is, it's likely going to be more temporary, that's what employers are doing. Now, on the flip side, if they're saying, oh, this might be more of a permanent layoff, then maybe you want to reconsider that. But from a legal standpoint, I think it's really the employer's business judgment. Obviously, you want to make sure you get out the appropriate COBRA notifications and things like that. But in terms of providing the benefit, that's going to be an employer judgment call.
Okay. Can you clarify the difference between a furlough and a layoff?
That's a pretty good question. They're pretty much the same. I mean, that's a good question. Generally speaking, a furlough is a type of layoff. So the way I tend to look at it is there's temporary and permanent layoffs. generally a furlough feels more like it's on the permanent side or an indefinite amount of time, whereas a temporary layoff, we're laying you off for 3 weeks. But neither one's really a term of art, and they essentially mean the same thing, which is your employment relationship is being suspended because of whatever the condition is that generated the need for the furlough. And then usually there's language in the letter saying what the duration is going to be. Is it permanent? Is it indefinite? What that's going to say. The terms themselves don't have a whole lot of legal significance.
All right, thank you.
So, Maureen, I did want to ask, we're at 12:05. We have, our plan was for the webinar to end at 12:30. And I wanted to make sure that we do want to get to the kind of the programmatic questions too, that folks have. So what do you think?
This is Mary. I apologize for jumping in. The question, Matt, about layoffs and furlough, there's a misconception, or accurate, I'm not sure. If an employer lays someone off, are they legally allowed to continue to pay the person's health insurance?
Yes.
That was the question.
You have to consult unless there's something in the particular employer's benefit, right? Because some of this starts to go into the plan documents for the benefits. And if there's something in the particular plan document of the benefit that says you can't do this in case of layoff, this, that, the other thing, which sometimes there is, that would be the only restraint. But there's no legal restraint prohibiting an employer from continuing those benefits. It would just be follow your policy. And I can't imagine in this day and age, given what's happening, that anybody's going to enforce that part of the policy if it was. But this would just be controlled by the policy document. There's no law that says you have to stop or you can't do it.
Thanks.
So I think there's one more kind of topic of questions around the legal things, and then there's a lot of questions about the waiver that I guess we're going to need to hit Karen up for. The other topic around legal requirements is having private pay parents continue to pay tuition during a closure. Do people?
That's a big one.
I know there's a lot, and there were a lot of P's in that sentence. So can they? Does it have to be written in their policies? How specific do the policies need to be? Can you just?
So that question, at least for me, is out of my wheelhouse. I know that Mary has been really helpful for CV in giving us the legal framework on that question.
Okay.
Well, there you go. Thank you, Matt.
Yes, thank you. So should we switch to the waiver kind of questions, or?
Yeah, so I wanted to make sure, Matt, if you can stay on, that's terrific. If you need to go, I want to thank you for
So much.
really kind of filling the gap that we had in with the panel, and deeply, deeply, deeply appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. I am going to jump off now, but anytime, happy to do it. Mary, thanks for reaching out to me, and enjoy the rest of your call.
Thank you, Matt.
And we do have a participant who says that PCCY did do a webinar on unemployment compensation in the last day or so, and the recording is on their website. So that may give additional assistance to people.
Great. So moving on, we've got, what do we got?
We've got 20 minutes and lots of questions.
Oh boy, okay.
So waivers, Karen, can you talk a little bit about, is there a waiver application form? If so, how do people access it? And then are people notified? Do they receive notification that they've been approved? And are there eligibility requirements? So that'll be kind of like the big opening group on waivers.
Okay, so something went out in Early Ed News just yesterday. They've actually kind of formalized the process a bit more. We had to really respond quickly when the governor moved from the 4 counties to statewide. And so originally it was an email with specific things that you needed to put in it. So certification staff are able to put together an actual form that went out yesterday and early on a certification listserv. If you need that, I think Diane, you have it, correct?
Yes, yes.
And we are working with DHS on like a resources page for providers on the DHS website within the COVID-19 response section. So we can work to see if we can get that posted there as well. But if anybody needs that waiver form or a link to that waiver form, you can always let me know. Send me an email and I will forward it to you, or Diane can forward it as well. So there is a form now that we're asking you to do. The rate that they're happening, I mean, at this point, there's about 600 in the queue. So again, what we're telling folks is that if you have applied for the waiver, you are presumptively eligible for it. This is unusual times, and we are assuming that if you are telling us that your families have a need for it, then we're not challenging you at this point. So you can operate while you are waiting. You should get an automated response that tells you that. And then I believe that where the caseloads are not crazy, certification reps are getting in touch with some people and letting them know they're okay. But again, if you don't, what the email says is if you don't hear from us, you are okay. So if it takes days or, I'm not sure. I think there are some places that have larger volume and it's taking a little bit longer to get to folks. So we set it up that way. Again, knowing that Philadelphia is a little bit of a different process and they're still kind of finalizing the communication that's going to go out on that. But there is that extra layer where the Philadelphia Department of Health, because of, the nature of Philadelphia and the space and the number of folks there, they have other considerations that they're taking into place or taking into consideration. And they will, you can continue to operate, but they could come back and tell you that you actually did not meet their test. And so you need to shut down. Did I answer all the questions?
Karen, I think one of the things that we also talked about is that folks have to, as they apply for these waivers, they need to make sure that they answer all of the questions.
Yes, yes.
So
and actually, one of the big things is that one of the very first directions was to put your county in the subject line. So that's very helpful because it helps us more easily sort the emails and get an idea of, what's the capacity in a specific area where, that's really important. But then Diane is right, to complete the form fully it's really important too.
Great. Other kind of Karen kind of questions. Maureen, did you notice?
Yes, there's a question about, this isn't exactly waiver, so we'll wander off of waiver for just a moment. If programs are not charging tuition to private pay parents and they do have subsidy children, are they still going to be paid the subsidy?
Yes, they are.
That was short and sweet.
Yes, I mean that requirement to have a private pay rate has more to do with setting the base rate. But yes, that will your parent provider agreement that relates, what you have in your policies and what a parent agreements you sign or have your parents sign is a legal agreement between the provider and the parent, and we're not getting in the middle of that. So yes, you will be paid.
I think that that's probably one of the biggest questions that we've heard over and over and over again, Karen. So thank you for answering that for the folks on the call today. Again, others, Maureen?
No, so back to the waivers. If a program has received a waiver and their county declares a state of emergency, which trumps which? Do they have to close again? Can they remain open because they have the waiver?
I mean, from Ocdel's perspective, we're going by the governor's decrees, and the governor has allowed for those waivers. I think that folks at the county level, and this also comes down to once they start enforcing what the latest, that now police will be enforcing whether businesses are open or not. I think this is just an important time to be reaching out to your county and making sure that they understand who you are, why you're open, what's happening, you know, maybe even reaching out to local law enforcement to make sure that they understand. You know, but as far as Octal is our approach has been, and again, we're not necessarily policing this. Like, we're not, certification reps are not going out. The certification reps are not doing, like, typical inspections have been suspended. But for those sites that are open, if there's a complaint about that site, that certification rep will need to go out. But they're not doing that on a regular basis. So we don't have any mechanism to kind of, you know that. So we're really encouraging you to have those communications at the local level. I hope that answers the question. I know it's muddy.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Another question on behalf of, so both home-based providers and centers with the waivers have asked this question, and that is, if they decide to stay open or they get a waiver and then they decide to close, A, is that okay? And B,
Yes.
do they need to report it?
Yes. Okay. So getting the waiver is no way an ongoing, you know, expectation that you're going to remain open. We recognize that you are individual businesses and you need to make decisions based on what's happening in your community. And all because you had the capacity to stay open and serve those essential services families at one point doesn't mean that you're going to continue that. We understand that. So you are, it's not an obligation to stay open. If you do decide like that you need to close, we ask that, just like we had everybody else do at the beginning, there is that RA account that we're asking you to send that information to, and there's a series of questions. Again, the number of kids at the site, there's a whole series of questions that we'd like you to answer. So just make sure that if you do decide to close, that you send that information to that RA account. And then I also would ask that if you talk to your ELRC, because what we're trying to work through now, it's still, in the very early stages, is that really making sure that ELRCs understand who's open and what their capacity is, because we might have children of essential service workers whose sites weren't able to be open, and we're trying to figure out if there are ways, particularly if they're private pay, because it's a much cleaner process, are there ways that we can then find them care in another, temporary care in another place? I think Maggie talked about that. So make sure that you're communicating with your ELRC as well, so that they're not continuing to try to, maybe divert families towards you or something like that.
Okay, switching. Nope, you're still there. Switching subjects again on you. Pre-K counts, and I think this applies to, we've got questions on the infant toddler also. Payments, the timeliness of payments, the consistency of ongoing payments, and has pre-K counts been released from the 180 days? So
I can tell you verbally what the conversations have been. We in our office are not concerned about this. And you have to remember, Octal's this dual deputate, so a lot of the stuff that we're getting goes through DHS, and this is a section that's going through PDE. So we've recommended, and we've not gotten any verbal pushback on, pre-K counts and Head Start supplemental programs not being held to the 180 days, just like a school district isn't. And we've also gotten no indication that they are not going to treat your grant payments just like we're treating CCW payments and continue them in full, irrespective of student attendance and irrespective of your program operation. That's not in writing. So we are telling folks that we are hopeful about that. I understand not having it in writing is very problematic for you. As soon as we get something like that in writing, it will go out in Early Ed News, and we will make sure folks, know about it. Programs or preschool specialists will probably be sending information out. But yeah, so that's what I can talk about with that. And I believe the infant toddler pilot, it's a similar, that one I'm not positive about, but I believe it's a similar situation.
Great. Maureen, we have 10 minutes left for this time, not to kind of like play TikTok, but one of the things that I do want to assure everybody, if you've put a question in the question box, we have a copy of it. And so if we're not answering your question right now, we hope that we'll be able to respond to it. And we will be sending out the list, sort of like an FAQ, after the webinar is over, and it will be posted to the PACA website. So know that. So I know because we have a whole lot of people on this call that there are a tremendous number of questions that people want answers to, and within this time frame we can only answer so many. So I'm going to give this back to Maureen. Ask some more questions, Maureen. Thank you.
So I know that Karen, there isn't an answer to this, but does anyone have any idea how long this will last? And what are we under right now in COVID-19 time? Is it through March 30th and then we'll see?
Yeah.
Or...
So it's the latest, it was that last statewide decree. So yeah, everybody kind of reset, and that's the date we're using. So I can tell you that within Octal, we've gotten no communication specific to any kind of an extension. But we within Octal are, have been told to assume that it is going to be extended, that this is going to be a much longer term situation than the 2 weeks that has initially been laid out. Again, we have nothing in writing. We have nothing verbally that's been told to us of that. We just, in terms of thinking about, how it's rolled out across the, the globe and the timeframes and everything that we're talking about. And just being responsive to our emergency plans, and thinking that's what an emergency plan is. You prepare for the worst. So we are preparing for it to be extended, and we are telling folks that they should be preparing for that as well.
Thank you. Someone asked about the survey results, if we will be sharing them. Yes, will definitely. As you can imagine, with 500 plus respondents so far, and some very open-ended questions, it's going to take us a little while to get those compiled, but we will share those with people. And also to let you know that the survey is still open. So if you have not taken it, please feel free to do that. It's very short. There's like 13 questions. It should take you about 10 minutes to complete.
Unlike printing it out this morning, which was 143 pages.
Yeah.
So
see that, go back to that reference to the text question. Let's say, and I don't know if Octal would get into this. This sounds like a little bit of a business practice question, so maybe our directors and administrators can talk. If parents refuse to pay, even if the agreement says that they will, what is your advice on handling that? So I think that's more of a provider's question than a Karen question.
Yeah, that's a question, because as you all know, I mean, we wouldn't want Octal in our quote unquote, this sounds so wrong, in our business, right? So yeah, so I would ask Mary, Ann, or Maggie to respond to that. Thanks.
And kind of related to that, if you have particular language that you have found resonates with parents and kind of angers them when you're talking to them about it, people would appreciate those suggestions.
This is Maggie. What we are doing right now is I'm fortunate because I'm part of the health system. We are trying to figure out how we're going to handle tuition. We haven't really decided that, because that hasn't been our priority. That sounds crazy, but it is, but it isn't. Our first priority was getting care for the employees of the health system. But we are in discussions as to how we're going to handle it. I have used the language as of now. Our practice is blah, 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 blah. Enrollment agreement says blah, 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 blah. But we've always had the policy that if you don't pay, you don't play. If you don't pay, we sometimes give 2 weeks and then that's it. You're no longer have a spot in the center. And I think that is, once this all comes out and we figure out exactly how we're going to move forward, I do think that will be the way we handle it. Because we're working on a way to help the families kind of still get some income here, but yet help the families out so they're not hit so hard, because people are getting laid off. I personally have been hit with my husband and my brother-in-law being laid off last night after the governor's announcement. It's going to affect a lot of their families. So they may not have the income. So we're looking at different ways to get a little bit of income from them, remain open for the employees, But for the community members who cannot use us because we've told them, you're not essential personnel, you're not essential medical people, that's not your role. We're looking at what options we have and what can we do to still meet our contract or enrollment agreement, yet give them a little bit of help. But I think ultimately, if they absolutely flat out refuse to pay, they're going to lose their spot. And once this whole thing, we get past it, because we will eventually get through this, they won't have a spot.
This is Mary. As I said, our provider agreement says that they can be charged up to 10 days, and we will enforce that and have told families that, not just for this case, but they've said they've gone away, they've been sick, whatever. The issue, the concern that, not concern, but the dilemma that I have now is, say we don't open, in 2 weeks and we're not charging families, how are we asking them to guarantee that we're going to keep their spot or they're going to stay with us? I mean, because that's also the other question. Are we going to lose these families? Or, they may be asking, how do they guarantee their spot? So that's not an answer. It's more of a question.
There is, I mean, these are not, I'm sorry, go ahead, Anne.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I probably have the same, I'm not sure I have any answers to that either. I think we've kind of figured out, April, but after that, in terms of keeping their spot is something that certainly we'll be thinking about. And my other concern is if we get to the point where we lay off the entire staff, how long does that take us to rehire everybody, or what does that look like? How long will that take? Because, the economy is going to need us here open so people can get to work as soon as they're allowed to.
Yeah. I mean, some of the options that are playing out in part of the stimulus plans, these are not the best options, but they are options. Is the possibility of fast tracking small business SBA loans at either low or no interest for long periods of time. Now, we did suggest that to somebody, and they said, I will be 93 when I paid off that loan. And I was like, sounds like my mortgage. But they're looking both here in Pennsylvania, the General Assembly, but also Congress. They know that small businesses, which is what makes up most of our early childhood programs, our child care programs, are in jeopardy. And they want to look for ways to stabilize that and help them. There is a $1 trillion package. And right now the Senate is in a place where they're looking at extending cash payments to individuals. So they know that this is a serious crisis, and we have to address it. So we don't have call this number now, but I would definitely stay on the Small Business Association's SBA website. I would continue to look at the Department of Community and Economic Development here in Pennsylvania, their website, as information comes out. These are all really good sources to know that PACA, as PACA hears about options and supports for programs and providers, that we will share that information. When we talk about the Small Business Administration, they are including both proprietary, for-profit, and nonprofits in those conversations. So it's not the best solution, but it is hopefully an option. Were there other?
Mary, yeah. As the chair of the public policy, the Ed Policy Committee of PACA, I just want to say that to everybody on the phone, first of all, thanks for joining us. We would love to always have this much participation when we're talking about policy. This is, let's think of this, one positive thing that we can do during this thing is highlight to our legislators as much as possible, both the state and the federal legislators, that America cannot work without childcare. They're seeing that, and every night we hear nightly news about what are parents doing without daycare. Well, it's not daycare, it's childcare. Well, we need to say, it's not just the airlines and the cruise lines that need to be saved. It's childcare centers that need to be saved. And as Ann said, when this ends, it will end, and this country needs a system of supported childcare providers. And, they can't just come to us now and say, open and do this, and we'll support you for the short term. So we just have to try to advocate for short-term relief and long-term stability.
That's a really good point, Mary.
100%, Mary.
Yeah, this is it's very important to tell the stories. I've talked to like hundreds of people recently, but we've debated over the last few years, and I don't mean for this to sound trite in any way, about whether or not we should, as a state and our early learning providers here in Pennsylvania, do a day without childcare. Unfortunately, we're learning this the hard way. As a community, as providers, but as business and as a Commonwealth, the actual impact of not having childcare on our economy. So this is one of those, hopefully as we move down the line, we'll be able to say, remember when, and we'll be in a much better place than we were right now, moving forward. It is 12:31. I did want to say PACA has been using its Facebook page to communicate because of the immediacy and of that communication style, and also because it then also puts it in a place where you can go back and look at it. Because things have moved so very, very quickly as we learn more and things change, PACA has not put something on its website. That's in the works right now. But again, I would, if you're looking for like immediate information of what we know right now, please visit PACA's Facebook page. You can always email any of the staff. If you go to PACA's website page, there are links to PACA staff email addresses. We don't put them out there just because then we get lots of spam. You know how that works. So you can, we are still working, just not here. And that includes our teach counselors. They are working from home. We are working to process teach payments to the best of our ability. But we will be kind of hung up since we're not supposed to be in this office, and it makes it a lot more challenging to do that work. So I want to, again, we've got the questions, we've got we've recorded this webinar. I want to thank all of you for taking the time out and participating in today's webinar. Our panelists, thank you very, very much. Again, we're all in this together. And the bottom line is, we want people to be safe. We want the children in our programs and their families to be safe. We want our staff to be safe. We want the directors and administrators of our programs to be safe. And we also want our programs to be economically safe. And so we're doing the best that we can to support and identify solutions that will support our small businesses across the Commonwealth. Family, group, and center-based providers, nonprofit, for-profit, proprietary chains, little chains, big chains. I mean, this is a vital component of our economy. So again, deep breaths, everybody. It's hard. It's hard. And one of the things that I just want to say, it's really important to reach out and talk to your friends, FaceTime, do those things that you're just not with them, but you're still with them. I have an appointment tonight to talk to a colleague in New Jersey over a glass of wine and FaceTiming. So keep connected. That's one of the great things about technology, that we can do that. So again, thank you for participating. Send us your questions. We have the questions we're going to get answers from. Again, thank you to our panelists. And be safe. Be safe. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.